Welcome to my video on Nadi Vijnana. Nadi Vijnana is pulse reading, and Nadi Vijnana can be talked about as the knowledge of the reverberation of consciousness. The heart is the seat of consciousness, and the blood is, of course, moving through the heart. So when we're reading the pulse, we're feeling the reverberation of consciousness. The pulse measures the state of balance and imbalance in the blood, and the blood is really the fourth dosha. The reason we focus so heavily on Agni and Ama in Ayurveda is because it's through good digestion that we create good blood, and good blood nourishes our cells and organs and helps to create healthy dhatus, bodily tissues. Nadi Vijnana is a way to gain knowledge through experience, and that is what Ayurveda is all about. Ayurveda is experiential medicine. In Ayurveda, we don't care what happens to a certain constituent in a petri dish. We want to know how something's reacting in this individual person's body. And then we can address the root cause, the imbalance, by really getting a full feel for their entire physiology, for their entire consciousness. So what we're looking to read in the pulse is Brahma Vidya, or total knowledge. The pulse can give us this integrated knowledge of physiology, and we're not looking for pulsation. We want to tune into the moment and find the guna, the qualities. And the number one thing we're looking for is the reverberation of wholeness, or samhita. Wholeness in this case meaning the integrated knowledge of physiology and the reverberation of consciousness. We're looking for wholeness in terms of ojas, which is of course vitality and immunity, and vata dosha, which is responsible for all movement in the body, and pitta dosha, which is responsible for all transformation in the body, and kapha dosha, which is responsible for all the structure and lubrication in the body. So exactly how do we read the pulse? Location is the most important thing. So what you want to do to take the vata pitta kapha pulse is you want to find the bony prominence below the palm. This is the the radial styloid process, and so we drag the finger a half centimeter below the radial crest into the radial groove, because we take the pulse on the radial artery, and we want the fingertips to be as perpendicular as possible to the wrist, because the fingertips have much more sensitive nerves than the rest of the fingers, and so we're not pressing the fingers together too tightly or spreading them apart. They're just nicely next to each other, and we generally do not lift the fingers while we're taking the pulse. We don't want to play the piano on the pulse, and we don't want to put different amounts of pressure on the different fingers. It's even pressure on all three fingers. We may need to put more pressure on a fleshy wrist, but the fingers will stay at an even balance. And what we want to do is feel the pulse. We want to feel it several times. You may spend 5 minutes reading the pulse. And don't analyze what you feel in the pulse until you let go of the wrist and you have a chance to sit with it. So the index finger is closest to the thumb, and then next to the index finger is, of course, the middle finger, and then the ring finger. And so the ring finger is closest in proximity to the heart. And each dosha has a relationship with one of these three fingers. So the vata finger is the index finger. And so what we're hoping to find in a balanced pulse is that vata, you feel it in its seat, which will be felt in the index finger. And so the seat of vata is actually the pelvic cavity, but in the fingers you'll feel it in the index finger. So you're looking for the gunas of vata. It may be one of the gunas of vata, qualities of vata, or all of them. So you might feel the dry, rough quality. It doesn't feel unctuous or oily at all. You might feel the cool quality. Maybe the temperature of the skin is cool. You might feel a lightness under your skin, under your finger, or a real subtle feeling like the pulse is really thin. But what's for sure is the vata pulse does not feel under one's control. It feels like a snake that's moving, and it escapes you. And in classic vata nature, it's an irregular pulse. So it could even feel coarse or brittle or hard, like a twig or a stick or a wire. Either way, Vata pulse will be less easy to define than the Pitta and the Kapha pulse. And so when Vata is grounded and balanced in the pelvic cavity, we will feel Vata in the index finger. And so the middle finger is the Pitta finger. And, Pitta is responsible for all transformation, and Agni and fire. And we're probably going to feel some warmth and some heat in the middle finger if Pitta is in its seat. The actual seat of Pitta is behind the belly button and the small intestines, but when we read the pulse, it should be in the middle finger. And so the wave of Pitta hits the finger like a bounding frog jumping up into the hand. And it feels slightly oily, kind of a medium between dry and oily. And it's liquid and moving or flowing. More liquid than Kapha, but more controlled than Vata. And the Pitta pulse is distinct and sharp and has an overall feeling of dynamism. It's and keeps the intensity of this bounding frog jumping up into your finger. The next finger is the ring finger, which is Kapha. And Kapha pulse feels heavy, like the slow paddling of a swan. And it's a really lovely feeling, the Kapha pulse. It's soft and cool like water, and feels unctuous and saturated and dense. It's easy to read because Kapha is stable and localized, and it's pleasant because it's the full expression of Ojas in the pulse. So what would it feel like if we felt a balanced pulse? The pulse will be clearly expressed. And what does it mean to have a clearly expressed pulse? It means we can easily feel the gunas. We know what we feel. The gunas are felt very easily. So a balanced pulse should be clear and stable, without excitement, without dullness. It should have an overall pleasant nature to it, and should have vitality. And all the doshas should be in their house. Vata in the index finger, Pitta in the middle finger, and Kapha in the ring finger. A balanced pulse feels good. Vata, Pitta, and Kapha pulsate together. All three are clearly expressed, but the feeling of wholeness dominates in the pulse. There's not one dosha that is dominating and making more noise. So what you'll find is that any repetitive behavior that you've been practicing for over 3 weeks, you'll be able to read in the pulse. And so at that point, if you've been staying up till 1 o'clock every night for 3 weeks working on something, it will start to show in the pulse. And the pulse will start to read as imbalanced. And what does an imbalanced pulse feels like? It feels not clearly expressed. It feels like you're reading the pulse through a blanket. It feels dull, heavy, gooey. And the blanket you're reading the pulse through is ama, or toxicity. So there are 3 main goals in reading the pulse. 1, reading the pulse provides early detection of imbalance, which could lead to disease. Reading the pulse helps us detect the root cause of the disease. Ayurveda has this elegant language and that allows one to quickly pare down from Shrota, Dhatu,